and we said we were never going to talk about him again. But we just got to put a nail in the coffin of Milo Yiannopoulos. Who is this guy? He is the controversial editor, senior editor of Breitbart. Yeah, Breitbart's former home of Steve Bannon, now chief advisor to President Trump. Yiannopoulos was the sort of star reporter, star columnist at Breitbart. He was Steve Bannon's acolyte. He's a big fan of and friend of Donald Trump's. In fact, this is a little sick. He calls Donald Trump Daddy. Ew. Just think about that. At any rate, Yiannopoulos, he's the guy who was a. Uh, Even Hillary talked about him. He's written stuff like Hillary at one point during the campaign quoted two Breitbart columns. Both of them were written by Yiannopoulos. One of them, the headline was, he put, "Birth control makes women unattractive and crazy." Breitbart, Milo Yiannopoulos. Another one, "Would you rather your child had feminism or cancer?" And of course, he says it'd be better to have cancer than to be a feminist. Milo Yiannopoulos, crazy, nuts, certainly provocateur. He was banned from Twitter he's been banned from Twitter for his racist and sexist comments. He was not allowed to speak again at UC Berkeley. But he had been invited, nonetheless, to address the Conservative Political Action Committee, the CPAC conference, famously, which starts here in Washington which takes place here in Washington this weekend. It's the high-end conservative gathering, national gathering. Every year they invite all the big right-wingers to speak, and it's usually a showcase. It becomes a showcase for presidential candidates. It was last year, or the leading conservatives. He's invited. A lot of leading conservatives says, "Why would you ever have this guy be part of our gathering?" Right? He's so extreme, he gives us all a bad name. Nonetheless, they invited him. And then a very conservative organization called the Reagan Battalion recirculated, I should say, a video that's been out there for a couple of years of Milo Yiannopoulos on a podcast called The Drunk Peasants. I listened to the entire podcast yesterday. I advise you not to unless you want to hear the grossest, foulest language you've ever heard, an hour of it. And during this podcast, Milo Yiannopoulos says that he thinks in some cases it's perfectly okay for older men to have sex with 13-year-old boys because this could be a coming-of-age experience for these boys, and these older men could teach these boys actually who they are. What does he exactly say? They could help young boys discover who they are. He complains about what he calls, quote, "the arbitrary and offensive idea of consent," arguing that some boys at 13 are old enough to know who they are, what they want, and these older men are doing them a favor by introducing them to sex and teaching them, if you will, the tricks of the trade, which he said he learned from a Catholic priest when he was molested at the age of 13. He argues that was a very good experience for him. He learned about, I don't want to get too graphic here, but he learned about certain sexual techniques, all from this priest, and he's grateful, he says, to Father Michael. Anyhow, that was even too much for CPAC, even too much for Republican conservatives. He was disinvited from CPAC. His publisher, who had given him paid him $250,000 for his memoir, which was going to be published later this year, called Dangerous. They canceled his book deal yesterday. It's unclear whether they're going to get whatever money they've already paid him back. And there's also word that he may be losing his job at Breitbart. At least Breitbart had said they're reconsidering his position there. So much for Milo Yiannopoulos. I hope that is the end of it once and for all. But it does make you wonder about the people who have defended him all this time, including Steve Bannon and including Donald Trump, who defended him when Berkeley canceled that speaking engagement. These are the kind of people they hang around with. You are known by the company you keep.